Welcome to this Windows computer and technology channel, and we're going to talk about CPU speed. It's a question that came from a viewer today because he saw my video about RAM memory in the task manager and made him think about a couple of questions. So when you right click on the start menu and go into the task manager, you go into performance and you go into CPU. The first thing that came to mind and that he's wondering about is that his computer's Intel CPU is meant to run at 2.8 gigahertz. Now, he's been looking at it from time to time in the task manager, and he's seen it run above 3 gigahertz. So he's wondering, is that a fault? What's happening? Well, today's CPUs are CPUs that can be actually throttled. They're dynamic. So basically, CPUs today have multiple cores. Sometimes only one is used. Sometimes multiple cores are used. It all has to do with how the CPU can generate heat and have performance. When software uses multiple cores, it will run usually slower because multiple cores at the same time generate a lot of heat, so as not to max out the heat dissipation capability. That will probably be the maximum speed that is advertised. But a lot of software and a lot of things that you do on your PC use only one core. Now, when only one core is used, because the other ones are dormant, you can run that core and overclock it, because even though it generates more heat, its total heat dissipation is still within range. So basically, they'll run that core at a faster speed if it's only one. But once the other cores kick in, then the speed will go down because multiple cores at the same time will generate more heat. But it doesn't mean it's slower. Multiple cores at the same time is actually faster than a single core at a faster speed, because it can actually make and calculate more instructions per second. The other question about the CPU is, my CPU's 3 gigahertz. It's faster than, somebody else's CPU at 2.4 gigahertz. Not true. It doesn't work like that. Don't look at the speed of your CPU in the gigahertz as an absolute number. This depends on the generation and the type of CPU. An example with Intel CPUs is that you've got Intel Core i3, i5, i7, and even i9 at the upper end. You also have generations, the newer CPUs and the older CPUs. Technically, a Core i3, because it's lower end, if it runs at 3 gigahertz, it's not going to run faster than, say, an i7 at 2.4 gigahertz. It actually probably will run slower because it doesn't have as much cache and it doesn't have as much performance per clock cycle than higher end CPUs. So don't look at the gigahertz number. Look at what generation and what type of CPU you're using. It's a much more valuable number. So even if your CPU is 2.4 gigahertz, if it's an i7 from the latest generation, it runs faster than at 3 gigahertz Intel CPU of 2 or 3 generations ago, or lower end like an i3 or even sometimes an i5. So be very careful with that number. That number doesn't necessarily mean I'm faster than you. It has much more complex interaction with the generation of the CPU. And of course, like I said, is it a mid-range or a higher end CPU? That also makes a difference. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe, give us thumbs up. Thank you for watching.